Should you start a startup? I'm going to explain the key founder traits you need and how to get the timing right. Startups can get over-glamorized on social media and everyone's telling you to start now, but they oversimplify to get your attention. In this video, I'm going to go in depth into what you need to know so you can make the best choice for you rather than what everybody else is telling you. You aren't any lesser if you decide it's not for you. A reminder, this is for educational purposes and not financial advice. Why should you even listen to what I have to say? I've angel invested in 6 companies and I'm a micro limited partner in 2 venture capital funds. I've interviewed over 300 people in the startup space across my podcasts, and over 200 people have been through my organization, Bay HQ's programs. Trust me? Let's go. First up, 5 reasons you shouldn't start a startup. Number 1, to be cool. Calling yourself a founder and CEO might sound amazing in your head, but most people really don't care. Don't expect to walk into rooms and everyone to be wowed by you being a founder. Chasing status through entrepreneurship is an empty game and you'll likely be disappointed. I'm sorry to burst your bubble here. Founders often end up doing a lot of dirty work before they have that massive breakout success. One example is Dimple Patel, who's now CEO of a company that's raised tens of millions. But in her first company, she was cleaning toilets in order to make things work. Number 2 is to get rich quick. And despite what everyone says about startups being so amazing, often at the beginning, there's very little money there. And even if you raise millions, you might also be spending millions and have very little left over for yourself. So be very careful when you look at these stories. If you just want to make money, there's much easier ways of doing it. Number 3 is to have an easy life. Let's separate out between lifestyle businesses and startup businesses. Lifestyle businesses, often are quick to set up, usually means you can make profit fairly quickly, but they might be very difficult to scale into millions and millions of revenue. Startups, on the other hand, might be very difficult to make profitable at the beginning, but might be able to scale to millions of revenues very quickly. Startups are not an easy life. If you're trying to scale to millions of revenue in the hope that someday you're going to make profit, so are your competitors. And if they're working hard and smart, so do you. There's this idea that people tell online that you can just work smarter, but it's very rarely the case in a competitive world. If you want an easy life by being a founder, maybe consider it a lifestyle business instead, and there's no shame in that. Number 4, because you hate your job. Be aware of the dream that people sell you. If you hate your 9 to 5 and think that startup founding is your freedom ticket, be very careful because often you might change your 9 to 5 for a 24/7. Being your own boss can be misleading. As an employee, you have a boss, yes. As a startup founder, you have many bosses. You have your investors, you have your customers, you have your stakeholders, your employees. There's many different people you have to keep happy if you want to keep the business running smoothly. Now, of course, you can make different decisions, but there's consequences to those decisions. Let's say you hate being the boss and you hate running your company. Often people, what they find is they have to keep the business going because they don't let down their employees who are dependent on them. So just remember, being a startup founder is often a responsibility, especially if you have a team. Number 5, and our final bad reason to start a startup, is to prove a point. This one's a little bit more controversial, so I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Many founders start off initially to prove somebody wrong because they've got a chip on their shoulder. Maybe their parents didn't believe in them, their boss didn't believe in them, their teachers. Maybe they got rejected from a date 20 years ago. And this sense of injustice gets them started, it makes them start moving. The challenge is, if that's all what sustains you, then at some point you're going to realize that the success doesn't fill that hole. Spite can get you so far, but what's all the success worth if it's a joyless ride because you're so obsessed with what other people think? And the sad truth is that some of those people might even care about your success. And then what? Okay, still with me? Good, I like you. Now let's move on to 2 reasons to start a startup. Every successful founder I've met has at least one of these 2 characteristics. 1, they're obsessed with the problem they're trying to solve. A mission sounds a bit woo-woo, but it's a competitive advantage. It's what keeps you going when the going gets tough. When deep in your belly, you feel the burning desire to solve a problem, you can move mountains. Usually this obsession comes from a problem you've experienced yourself, maybe a loved one, or maybe a group of people you really care about. And I say the word obsessed rather than passionate, because passion is easy. Everybody says they're passionate, but obsession shows that it's something which you can't stop thinking about, and you really want to solve this. And for some people, it might be something which sounds obvious, right? So B. Bakshi has created See the Science, which is trying to detect cancer earlier, and has helped save countless people because they've been able to spot it and get people to treat it earlier. Let's take 2 examples of 2 very different problems. One is very obvious and stereotypically what people would consider as a mission and a problem worth solving, whereas the other one has a huge impact in its field and for the people working in the area, but maybe isn't as well known. So first up we have Bee Bakshi, founder of See the Signs, which helps detect cancer early. Everybody can understand that very easily why it's a big problem and why it needs to be solved. Yet, you can also build a startup with an idea that isn't so obvious and people don't necessarily understand the problem straight away. So one example of that is Sonal Rattan, co-founder of X8. Now what she's doing is solving an infrastructure problem for data that existed in the problems that she was having while working at a major bank, and she's now solving that for many other banks too. Both are good businesses, and both founders are very obsessed with their problems, even though they're very different problems. And you shouldn't feel ashamed if people don't necessarily understand the problem you're working on straight away. Okay, the second reason is because you're obsessed with building things. I love doing this stuff. I love coming up with ideas, trying to work out how to make this happen, then building it, seeing the results, and going again. You'll see this in many entrepreneurs. Some don't actually love the problem they're trying to solve, but they love the challenge of trying to solve it. They love that nobody else could do it, and they're going to push themselves into innovative and new spaces. If you keep hearing startups are hard, and that makes you more excited to try, then this might be you. Okay, so hopefully you've got one of those two reasons, and maybe you have some of the other bad reasons too. Not everybody is perfect. Let's move on to the traits that make a great founder. Founder traits. You'll see a lot of clashing advice in this area because we all have our own cognitive biases. There's all things that we pay more attention to than others. And also the reality is that many founders are different to each other, and the people who succeed are sometimes quite different in their traits to others. Often when there's a founding team, you'll have some people have some traits and some people have other traits. And that's totally normal. It's important to be aware of what your traits are and what the traits of your co-founders are as well, if you have any. If you know you're weak at some of these traits, but your co-founder has it, then all isn't lost. I've taught MBA students about the traits for founders, but you shouldn't just take my advice. So what I've done is brought together different lists from some of the world's leading experts and compared them to see what the trends are and what everybody says. So here are the 4 lists I'm going to use. The first is by Paul Graham, who's a founding partner at Y Combinator, which is widely considered one of the best accelerators in the world. Second is Sam Altman, who's currently CEO of OpenAI and was previously a partner at YC2, and his list is combined with another YC partner, Paul Buchheit. Third is by EQT's Polly Barnes, who is a talent operating partner there and spent 6 years to research what the best founder traits are. EQT have hundreds of billions of assets under management. And finally, a list of 10 traits from Harvard Business School's Course on Entrepreneurship by William Salman. I made my list before checking theirs, but you can see the similarities between them. I'm going to dive into each of the major traits now. Resilience appears in all of the lists in some form. Every single founder is going to get knocked down. Where the difference is which of the founders get back up and go again stronger. A great example of resilience is Radha Vyas, co-founder of Flashpack. Having just had a newborn baby, her company went bust because of the global travel bans in 2020. They were making 20 million in revenue, she'd been working on it for years, and it all went to nothing. Yet she was able to pull herself out of this, and now it's grown to be even bigger than where it was. Harvard Business School had both persistence and comfort with failure, which are linked, but not quite the same. So persistence is keep going, but comfort with failure is even when things go wrong, are you okay with that? Can you move on from it? Or do you dwell on it and let it hold you back? Next is curiosity. If you're building a lifestyle business, you don't necessarily need to think outside of the box. You can use the tried and tested methods to build a business that's profitable and gets you to where you want to be. For startups though, you do need to be innovative and creative. If you're not curious about the world around you and why things are the way they are, you'll not be able to spot opportunities and areas where things can be better. You need to push the boundaries of innovation and have a vision where others don't. Let's take Nav Sawhney. While in rural India, he noticed how his neighbors were having to hand wash clothes for hours every day. And many other people knew this was happening, right? It wasn't an unknown problem. But Nav was more curious. He looked into it. He tried to understand what could be done about it. He then invented a new type of washing machine as part of the washing machine project, which is now being used by tens of thousands of people all across the world to give them the dignity of clean clothes. His curiosity and imagination meant they was able to build something new that nobody had ever thought of. The next trait is related to self-awareness and humility. The problem with resilient and curious founders is they can convince themselves of anything, and maybe they get deluded into believing they can build something even when it's just not working. And this is where the flexibility really comes into play. Can you be able to take a step back, look at things critically, look at things objectively, and work out what's working and what isn't, and double down on things that are. Can you diagnose the problems in your own leadership? Can you diagnose the problems in the direction you're taking or not? The iterative process is crucial to being a good founder, and only possible when you know what needs to be improved. I've had to eat humble pie many times, and many of my ideas have absolutely sucked, and I've tried them and so excited about them, and they haven't worked. But I have to let go of them. Faisal is a great example of self-awareness. He co-founded Algebra, which is a fintech which raised a Series B, doing incredibly well. He was COO, and he realized he'd hired the best people in each subdivision underneath him. That in reality, the company didn't really need him anymore. He'd done the best job he could, and now he wanted to take on a new challenge. To have that self-awareness, to be able to set things up in a way so the business runs without you, is crucially important, and it shows a lack of ego. He's now building a health tech called Performer AI. The next trait is communication, and it's all different types of communications, but it's with your customers, with your investors, with your employees. Your startup will struggle to grow if you can't motivate people with your words and your actions. Many founders struggle here. They're not concise and they're not clear enough because they have the idea in their head and they can't get it out to the world. Ahana Banerjee is a really good example of a young founder who's exceptional at communication. She's been on so many panels and so many podcasts. And what this does is get her word out there about her belief and her motivation, which attracts people. This is great because one, it gets her customers, but also it gets her an army of people who are willing to follow her because they believe in her leadership. And this means that she's had a huge number of interns over the years who are able to help her to build her mission because they believe in her and her mission. And that's because she's a master of articulation. The next trait is about speed of decision making. One of the greatest shocks for first-time founders who are previously from the corporate world or from institutions is just how many decisions you have to make all the time about every little thing. Because before you didn't have that freedom. With freedom comes responsibility. I spend most of my time making decisions, all these micro decisions throughout the day. I need to make them quick and effectively, which is a huge burden upon me. The skill is in knowing which decisions are reversible and which ones are irreversible. And what you want to do is make sure you're making mostly irreversible decisions correctly and being okay with making some of the reversible decisions wrong. If you're a Fafa or a dilly-dally, you're going to need to up your game in order to succeed in the startup world. Focus, focus, focus. This wasn't on my list, but now I see it as one of my biggest weaknesses and something I'm really trying to work on hard. Because focus isn't just about Pomodoro technique and time boxing and all these little hacks. It's about relentlessly prioritizing what you're working on and working on the right things at the right time. Too many founders, including me, spend too long on distractions and shiny objects, and it means we don't compete effectively. If I'm only spending 5% of time on the things that are most important to the business, when other founders in the same area are spending 90% of those time in those areas, who's going to win? The challenge is not allowing yourself to be guilt-tripped into people-pleasing and doing what's right for your company and your startup. I'm grouping naughtiness and risk tolerance together here. It's about, are you willing to go a little bit further than other people are? Are you okay with some things not going quite to plan? Classically, some people might think of this as fake it till you make it, but this isn't about outright lying. If you fake it till you make it, you will get caught out. Being a bit naughty is more about, can you bend the rules or play within the rules just on the edge? Are you willing to take a bit more risk than other people? But make sure that you don't do anything that if it was to be on the front cover of the news, you'd feel bad about. Intelligence. I'm too nice to bring this up most of the time, and many founders and investors don't talk about this enough because it just sounds arrogant. But Sam Altman is right here. Being intelligent is clearly an advantage. If you can think about problems and solve problems quicker than other people can because of sheer raw intelligence, obviously that's going to be an advantage to you. I've always been able to use my brain power to get myself to where I want to be. If you're somebody who thinks that maybe you aren't as intelligent as maybe you hope to be, that doesn't mean you can't still be successful. You just need to over-index on the other traits more and bring in people to help you on that side. Often what you hear people say is that the hire people who are smarter than them. And if you can do that and be the ringleader, you can still be a great founder. Next up is friendship. Y Combinator has a clear preference for startups with more than one founder. Of course, there are startups with a solo founder which is successful, but this is about your odds and probability, right? Having a co-founder you're highly aligned with who covers the skills that you don't have is going to be an advantage. But the trait here is, can you make that relationship work? Can you be a good friend to a co-founder so that this relationship lasts in the long term? Because if there's conflict there, that's going to affect your startup's ability to compete effectively. Building a startup is hard. It's easier with a friend. The final trait I'm going to pick out here is frugality. And it absolutely makes sense. What this means here in this context is that if you're given X amount of money, can you make it go further than somebody else can? And we're looking at investment. If you can prove to them you can use your money effectively and they give you 10 million, or they could give you 10 million, or they give a competitor 10 million, but you're the frugal one, they're going to give you the 10 million, right? So having that eye on cost, having the most effective outcomes for the inputs you put in is always going to stand you in good stead. So hopefully you're listening to this and you can see some of those traits in yourself, and congratulations, hopefully that's great for you. But how do you know if you should become a startup founder now? Is now the right time? Should you go all in? And there's some founders and some people online who will tell you, burn all the boats, go all in. But the challenge is survivorship bias. I've already met dozens of founders who went all in, lost it all, and have quietly disappeared. And it's sad to see, right? Because they didn't have the right guidance around them in order to make that decision in their own best interests. So don't listen to people online when you're making big life decisions for yourself. Make sure you are thinking carefully and analysing your own circumstances to make the best decision for you. So don't quit your job because you've watched this video. But what you can do is go away and think about the things I've said, think about the things that other people have said too, and use that to come to a conclusion that makes sense for your life. I only want to give you more clarity about your constraints and to ease your path into entrepreneurship if you decide that's right for you. Your financial situation is the first factor to consider. Some of you will have crazy rich families and it really doesn't matter what you do because they're just going to look after you anyway. And some of you, maybe you've won the lottery. Most of you aren't that lucky. Most of you have financial realities and you need to look at how much money do you have in the bank, what's your normal expenses, how long would you have before you need to make money and start making profit. And all of these considerations are really important because you need to understand how your life is rather than what anybody else's is online. So take these different considerations, look at, do you have the amount of money right now to be able to take a risk or not? Or how can you mitigate this? How can you increase your runway? Number 2 is your dependence. It's one thing to risk the roof over your own head. It's a very different thing to risk the roof over your children's heads. And this is reality, right? Is that if you have people who rely on you, maybe that's your spouse, maybe it's elderly relatives, maybe it's sick relatives, all of these things means that you have less freedom than somebody else might have. It might mean they have more obligations on your time than other people do. And if that's the case, you need to work out a plan around that. Maybe, for example, you might have a very supportive partner. And this doesn't matter if you're male or female, right? It's about, do you have a partner who can take on some of the burden that otherwise you might have to do? And if they can, that might enable you to chase your dream. But you need to be very realistic about this, about the effects it has on other people. Because obviously, you don't live in a vacuum. And you need to decide where your priorities lie and what kind of life you want to live. There is this idea that every founder who's successful is a young kid, but that's really not the case. There are many successful parent founders. So don't rule yourself out. Just make sure you have a plan for how it's going to affect you and your family. Third is your experience. When building a startup, there are obvious ways that you can increase your skill set to help you hit the ground running when and if you do quit your job and go all in. One is domain expertise. Can you really nerd out on what you're trying to build? Maybe you work for another company in the industry, maybe you do pro bono work in the industry. How do you get that experience before even quitting? Second is your network. Can you start going to networking events in advance? Can you start making friends in that space? Third is maybe you want to work for another startup first, so you get an idea of actual startup reality life before you go all in. So all of these different things can help you decide whether this is the right moment for you. Fourth is your health. I put on over 10 kilograms once I became a full-time founder. It's stressful, high pressure, I sleep less. There's all these effects that it has on me, right? And if you know already you're in poor health, then maybe you need to focus on that first. Because as that saying goes, I can't remember who said it, is that you've got 99 problems until you have a health problem, and then you have one. So make sure you're in peak performance mode, make sure you're looking after yourself, because what you don't want to do if you, for example, suffer from mental illness or different conditions, is put even more pressure on yourself. Try to work on these problems first to give yourself the best chance of success. And also, right, I want you to do what's best for you. I want you to look after yourselves because that's what this is about at the end of the day, right? It's about, can you live a good life? And living a good life means being healthy, both physical and mentally. Fifth and finally is your style. Realistically, startups is always going to be difficult. There's going to be stress, there's going to be high pressure, there's going to be all these things going on. You're going to have to make sacrifices, you're going to have to do trade-offs. And you might just decide that right now, it's just not the right time. You want to have more free time, you want to be able to do things and go on holiday all the time and have vacations all the time. And that's difficult at the beginning of a startup if you're trying really hard to get something off the ground. So when you're thinking about building a startup, think about these realities too. There's no shame in saying you want to be able to have the time to do other things. Whereas a startup, you need to be obsessed to really get off the ground. And some people, maybe they can have some work-life balance at the beginning. But reality is that many of them don't. And you need to decide, do you want to sacrifice that or not? Okay, bonus advice. Thank you for making it this far. Let's go into some bonus advice, which is just start and put it under low stakes, low pressure. Don't quit your job, just make something on the side. You can use the AI tools now to test ideas. You can do customer validation. There's so much you can do without needing to quit your job. But what you can do is just get that taste. Don't just leave it up here as an idea in your head, should I become a founder or not? Test it out, join programs where you can. We have a program called the Incubator, which is for people who want to set a startup idea. You can join that. It doesn't matter if you drop out halfway through, but at least you know a bit more about it, right? So biggest advice I'd have to people is how can you test whether or not you want to be a startup founder without needing to have the massive risks that people think you might need to take. So you've reached the end of this video now, and I really hope that was useful to you. If you stuck around this long, I really hope it was. And what we've been able to go over there is what are good reasons to start a startup, bad reasons, the traits you need, and then also how you can decide about the timing for you. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, and tell me if there's anything missing, any traits you think are important as well, and we can dive into them.